DreAllDay.com.
Baldwin, DreAllDay.com. Topic of this video is the key to expertise. The key to expertise, I'm going to tell you this up front, then I'm going to explain it to you. An expert takes a subject that is seemingly complicated, and for the layman, person who doesn't know anything, the expert simplifies it. It makes it easy to understand. Whereas the wannabe expert, person who poses as an expert but is not really an expert, what they do is they take a seemingly, what generally should be a simple subject that the expert knows is simple, or let's say another expert would know is simple, and what the quasi-expert does is that they complicate the subject in order to basically hold a frame over anyone else and say, well, if you can't explain this part and you don't know this detail and that detail, then you can't question me, or you can't talk about it, or you are unqualified to offer an opinion. To give you an example of this, if you remember the whole COVID situation with the virus and all of that, right? Whenever someone would ask just a simple question, well, why do we need to wear these masks if the mask says that it doesn't stop the spread of any type of airborne virus? It says that right on the box of the mask. Why do we still have to wear masks? And someone who was a proponent of mask wearing would say something like, well, if you're not an expert in this, and this, or you're not a scientist, or you're not a doctor, or you haven't appeared in any peer-reviewed journals, then who are you to ask the question? Just put the mask on and shut up, or just take the jab and shut up, or just social distance and shut up. Y'all remember people using this type of frame. I'm not saying this exact language, but you remember a lot of people using this type of frame. That's a quasi-expert frame. If someone is actually an expert, they would have been able to answer the question in very simple terms, of whether they were right or wrong is besides the point here. If they actually are an expert, they could have answered the question in very simple terms in a way that a person who has no scientific background, no level, a 0 on their level of 100 expertise, would have been able to understand it. And when someone's a true expert, I'll take subjects that I talk about. I talk about things like mindset. I talk about business. I talk strategy. I talk systems. I talk accountability. I used to talk about basketball a lot. I have an expert level of knowledge in those subjects. And I say that humbly because I can explain those subjects to someone who knows nothing about them in a way that you would understand it. Like, you don't have to know anything about basketball. I can have a conversation with you and help you understand how basketball works, why it works, what to do in it, whether we're talking actually playing basketball, doing moves in basketball, playing at different levels. I can explain any of it to someone who knows nothing about the sport, because I'm an expert. Experts simplify. That's the whole point that I want you to get. Experts simplify things, whereas non-experts, or people who want to be experts, or they're trying to, basically they're letting their ego talk for them, they complicate things. And they could technically be an expert, but often people do this when their ego's involved. So again, if you challenge someone who's an expert on the subject, you ask them a question about something that they said, and you're just questioning it, maybe you're not sure you believe what they said. If they're a true expert, they're not bothered by that, because someone who's a true expert doesn't mind you asking them questions. If I tell you I'm an expert when it comes to mindset, and you ask me a question about mindset, there's no question you could ask me that is going to bother me that you asked. I'm actually going to be happy any question you ask me, because any question you ask me, being the true expert that I am, all it does is provide me an opportunity to further show you how much of an expert I am by answering your question in a way that you will understand it, even though you don't know nearly as much as I know. So I'm happy when you ask me questions. Whereas someone who is not really an expert, they get annoyed. You'll notice this. They get annoyed when you ask them questions. How is somebody who was let's say, during the whole COVID situation, for example, let's just use that. During the COVID situation, how does someone who's a scientist get mad that you asked them a question? They should be happy you asked them a question. That's a way of them showing you how smart they are. Shouldn't they be happy that you asked them a question? All they get to do is show off what they know, right? Doesn't that just make sense? I would think it makes sense, but somebody can tell me if I got that wrong. In any other subject in which I know stuff, I'm glad when people ask me questions. I'm glad when I can turn on this camera and talk about it, or when I can open up a word processing document and write about it, because all I get to do is show off. When I get interviewed, I'm glad, because all I'm doing is showing off what I know. All right, ask me more questions. All right, every question you ask me is just giving me more chance to show you how much I know about the thing that I'm talking about. Whereas someone who is not an expert, what they're going to do is try to not be asked any questions. They don't want to ask any questions, or they'll try to hold the frame over you. Like, again, why are you asking questions? Are you this? Are you that? And even when other people do this, someone who's not an expert, they'll say something like, well, you're not a doctor, so who are you to question anything? That doesn't make any sense. Again, any of you, and the key point here, this is the takeaway of all of this, any of you who is or you plan on being an expert at what you do, understand that your job is to simplify things and make them easy to understand for the beginners and the amateurs. If you are complicating things and making them harder to understand, then you need to check your status as an expert, because true experts know their stuff well enough that they don't need to try to go over people's heads. I see this on social media, on X, aka Twitter. That's the only app where I actually engage with people like that. But I see people doing this all the time. They try to go over people's heads. Like, oh, well, you don't know this, you don't know that, you haven't done this, you haven't done this. As if it's an invalidation of somebody asking a question, which, again, doesn't make any sense. True experts want all the questions. They want all the what you all like to say, all the smoke. And when I say all the smoke, I don't mean necessarily disagreements, but just questions. You can ask me any question about anything in which I tell you I'm an expert, I'll happily answer your question, because I know my stuff. And if you know your stuff, you should be thinking the exact same way. With that said, workonyourgameuniversity.com. You want to work with me directly and you want to get your expertise in whatever area you're an expert, you want to get it out to the world and make money from it, make a business out of it, get your name known from it, go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. That link is down below in the description to this. That's where you get direct access to me, direct access to all of our trainings, all of our programs, all of our tactical stuff, our strategic stuff, and our courses, and you get access to me as a coach. Again, that's workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre, all